god. Ugh. Listen, guys, I wasn't really expecting anybody over right now. Let me go change. Hold on. Fortnite t-shirt underneath this. Without beating around the bush, we are in a scary time right now. The coronavirus has the world on lockdown. There won't be any visits to bars, visits to friends, a lot of normal social interactions are on pause. And we don't know when that's going to end or what that looks like. How much does fashion matter if there's nobody there to see your fit? If you flex in space, does anybody see your outfit? One of the things about fashion that I've always loved and I've always talked about is that it is extremely social. Fashion is creativity, an art form, a hobby, or whatever, where we signal to other people how we want to be perceived, what tribe we're a member of. What would it mean if people didn't see us wearing these clothes? Would we still wear them? There are numerous art forms that exist for the sheer pleasure of creating something. But there are certainly a lot of art forms or creative styles or forms of expression that seem to rely on both an audience and usually some form of discourse. Does a dancer need an audience in order to feel like they want to dance? Does a painter need an audience in order to paint? Franz Kafka wrote his entire life but remained in obscurity and actually requested that his manuscripts were never shared. Luckily for us, they eventually were. But to be fair, I'm not talking about designing clothing. I'm talking about wearing clothing. How does that act? Choosing an outfit, creating a wardrobe, making decisions on personal aesthetics or style. How does that compare to those other art forms where the kind of pioneers, these different pioneers, are rather autonomous, regardless of whether or not there is somebody looking at them? What about something like fashion or like speech that is kind of built around this idea of communicating something? A theory that's existed in psychology for decades is this idea that the language that you speak actually plays a role in how you think about the world, how you actually deal with problems. Your cognition might be influenced by the languages that you learn. In this way, basically, just knowing words, having language, actually seems to play a part in shaping the way that people think about ideas. Just simply having the words in your head allows you to see the world in a different way. Does the same kind of principle come into play with fashion? Can simply wearing clothes change the way that I think about the world, even without, say, the kind of social interaction that we typically expect when we're talking about fashion or we're thinking about like luxury clothes? There are a lot of studies that have tried to look into the psychology of fashion. Many of them do involve kind of more strictly social interactions, like looking at how people act differently in groups when they're wearing formal clothing. There was, however, this really interesting article that was published in the Journal of Experimental Psychology. And in the study, they had participants wear a lab coat and a painter's smock and perform different tasks. What they found was the participants that wore the lab coat typically performed better at tasks that involved a lot of focus, and as a result, they coined this term called enclothed cognition. Basically, from the abstract, enclothed cognition means it captures the systematic influence that clothes have on the wearer's psychological processes. It is a part of a larger field of research that examines how humans think with both their brains and their bodies, an area of study known as embodied cognition. So, there is some work or some studies that kind of implicate that wearing clothes actually will kind of influence how you think. And I still think that just looking at the studies, there is still a social dynamic involved. In the one where they coined enclothed cognition, they mentioned that participants from the get-go would associate lab coats with science, with focusing. And then when the participants would wear the coats, without being prompted, without being pushed, they would exhibit the qualities that they thought those coats kind of associated with. Now, obviously, that doesn't exist in a bubble, but it does still play a role in kind of understanding, will wearing clothes kind of do something? Will it change something about the way you think and the way you act? Can we wear clothes that will make us more peaceful or more focused? If you are a freelancer and you work from home anyway, will wearing nice clothes compared to pajamas actually make you do better at your job? So let's return to the idea that the internet and discourse might be the way that we continue to involve ourselves or invest in fashion. In Roland Barthes' book, The Fashion System, he makes the argument that clothing can only signify through the speech that's used to describe it. And he follows that up by saying also that language is kind of a veil. It's used to, quote, blunt the buyer's calculating consciousness, meaning that fashion only exists within the discourse. And without discourse, without the discussion of clothing, fashion is really nothing more than buying things. At least that's Barthes' argument, that essentially the life and spirit and creativity of fashion exists within the words, the writings. Because unlike other studies, as he points out, like aesthetics, when we're doing discussions or criticisms about like art or different aesthetics that are more concrete, fashion thrives in the constant changing nature of the fashion world. So what does that mean for us on the internet when we're talking or thinking about clothes? I think for me personally, it's a very valuable time to reflect on the clothes that I do own, to think about my wardrobe or like the kind of things that I admire or like pieces that I would want to have. It's an opportunity that for everything else to pause and for me to look at the way I've been thinking about clothes, the way I've been thinking about my wardrobe, and what I would want to do later. I'm sure there's a lot of people online who are thrilled to see that fashion's like breakneck speed is coming to a halt. There's a lot of people out there who aren't really quote-unquote into trends, who are more interested in seeing kind of this long fashion game. Maybe vintage clothing will become more significant in the next couple of weeks. And I think maybe this is a silly comparison, but I think of it as kind of like vanilla WoW. You know, World of Warcraft had so many expansions throughout the years where they would constantly add and change elements of the game. But during that time, people wanted to just play the original version. They wanted to practice or explore the original mechanics, the original dynamics of the game, and of course, the original armor sets. It's kind of like that. We're putting a pause to any more expansions in fashion, and right now, we can only discuss what we have in front of us. And through that kind of strictness, maybe we'll discover something new, something even more beautiful than we realized. I want to make the point that essentially all these ideas are fanciful and interesting, but they exist under the background that what is happening in the world is very serious and very scary. There are thousands of people who have died. There are thousands of people who are going to get sick. And at the time that I'm making this video, it's only going to get worse from here. I understand that. I think everybody who likes fashion understands that this is a frivolous pursuit. But it might also be relevant to say that to take an interest in art, fashion, whatever, maybe it's important to continue to be inspired and creative even when you're the most afraid, because that is kind of like it's a human condition thing. It's like if we don't hold on to the things that are important to us, even in dire times, then we really lose ourselves. So because of the virus, I actually left New York. I came back to New Hampshire with my girlfriend and her sister. And as I'm editing this video right now, I'm thinking about how I first took an interest in fashion. It was here in this state. It was in a rural part of the country. And in high school, I didn't know anybody else who was interested in fashion. The people in my town, in the area, it really wasn't something that men did. They didn't take an interest in fashion. But I still loved to wear these goofy outfits. I still loved dressing up the way I like to, and even though I felt like I wasn't being seen by people who kind of quote-unquote get it, it still made me feel special to do that. And I think it's kind of an interesting way to close the video and to think about what it means to get dressed even if you're not necessarily being seen. So if you're watching this video and you see yourself stuck inside for the next weeks or months or whatever, and you're thinking, does fashion even matter anymore? Does fashion matter right now? I would say if it makes you feel special, if it still makes you feel good to wear your designer clothes or wear your special pieces that you've thought about, your grails, then it's still, there is some magic in there. It's still relevant just to you. So thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.